Struggling, feeling overwhelmed with your increasing amount of workload? Hi, I'm Dr. Heather Williamson with Transformation Group, and we're a leadership consulting firm that believes every leader should be developed to their full potential. We listen to what the real challenges are causing you to feel burned out and customizing a coaching plan that guarantees success. If you're wanting to become a less stressed leader, call us at 804-598-9175 or check out our website at transformationgroupllc.com.
Good morning. You're listening to Dr. Heather Williamson, the Leadership Doc, host of Talking Leadership. And I am excited because, it is a small world. What is that, 7 degrees from Kevin Bacon? Or what is that?
I think that's something like that.
Something like that. So I have Karen Michael in the studio today. And we, years ago, lived in the same small town, Chester, Virginia. And your sister went to school with my sister, the middle one, and I was like, I know, because I'm like, I know you. So, and here we are again today.
I know, we figured that out, actually. 2 different maiden names.
I know. So, so I have Karen on the show today, and I hope you have your cup of coffee, because it is early in the morning. But I've been following you on LinkedIn for a while now, and actually when it was during the whole COVID thing, I was actually using your articles that you were writing for the Richmond Times-Dispatch in my YouTube information, my YouTube videos.
Oh, great.
I always gave you credit.
Thank you, that's fine.
Because I said, I'm a psychologist, but I am not an attorney, and I don't play with on TV. So I would always share that because it was just really great information. And so I thought, it'd be really great if I had you on the show. So Karen Michael is an HR attorney, and she is the owner of Karen Michael PLC, which is a workplace law and human resources consulting firm. And her area of expertise is workplace investigations, training for managers, leaders, and employees, and employment law advice, workplace audits, and general workplace advice. And I know when I was speaking at the HR conference this spring, your session was going to be right behind mine.
Oh, okay. Which one? The SHRM one?
Yeah, the SHRM one. And then you had to wave out for whatever. I think your son was doing something. But, so I missed seeing you. But anyway, so I have Karen in the house this morning. And so Karen, welcome, and share a little bit about what your consulting practice is about. I kind of highlighted briefly, but
yeah, thank you so much for having me. So I graduated from law school, went into big law at McGuire Woods, and then was an executive in human resources at SunTrust for a while. And really, I kind of looked around and thought, gosh, this place is kind of screwed up. I bet everywhere's got these issues. And after being at McGuire Woods and being at SunTrust, I realized there's just workplaces have a lot of needs. And
yes, they do.
People bring their whole selves to work when they come to work. And we are people and humans and interacting and needing to interact in a certain way of professionalism and respect and civility. Sometimes people don't get that memo. And so I have, for the last approximately 15 years, had my own firm. And all I do is training and consulting and advice and really always working with the employer to make that workplace work for everyone. Mm-hmm. And my goal is just to promote a respectful and inclusive work environment. And it's tough out there. There's a lot going on in our workplaces. Managers are just fundamentally not ready for many of their roles as managers. Mm-hmm. And some don't have the talent or the training.
I was going to say, a lot of them don't have the training. They just get promoted into a role or hired into a role without that formal, and I do executive coaching, so
right,
without that formal,
yes,
training on how to handle, especially holding people accountable, which we're going to talk about because that's one of my pet peeves.
Yes,
because you've got to hold people accountable, and people that may produce areas of conflict which people don't want to address.
No, they don't want confrontation. They view it as a confrontation. When I do my training, readjust that narrative. So it's not designed as a confrontation. It's more designed as, I care enough about your career that I want you to know that what's going on right now is not helping you to be successful. Converting that whole theory that this is a negative confrontation to, I'm showing you how much I care about you as an employee by telling you this is not helping you to succeed.
Exactly.
And so changing the narrative, it takes time, it takes skill, it takes a lot of training and effort. And I don't think people realize when they become a manager how much responsibility that really entails, and how much, frankly, legal obligation you have. That's the other part of it as well.
Right.
And so it's making sure that people understand that, because it really all starts with who's in charge here. Because when you go to work somewhere, whoever is your manager, that you're entrusting that manager to take care of you and take good care of you in that workplace. That's the role.
Right.
And when that's
why you're working there. That's why you said, yeah, I want to have that engaging culture where everyone feels like, what we're going to talk about.
Everyone talks about culture.
But it is a challenge. It is a big challenge. And speaking of just employees and holding people accountable, and actually people doing the job that they were hired to do and get a paycheck for, you wrote a book called Stay Hired, and it's thriving and surviving in the 21st century workplace.
Yes.
So share a little bit about that book.
So I had this idea for many years. I have a series in my mind of books that I'm going to write. This was the first one. And I was trying to analyze why it is people go into, first of all, there's a very negative narrative right now about the workplace. There's a very negative narrative about work. It's like work is this negative, terrible thing. And my goal with the book was to readjust that narrative. And I think one of the reasons that people go into the workplace and they have a lot of dissatisfaction is they don't have the right expectations. They don't really understand what is this going to be like. And so part of the purpose of the book is to really lay out, these are the expectations. This is what you can expect when you go to work. And this is what's going to be expected of you. And this is what you can expect from your employer. And so it outlines the characteristics of a successful employee. It talks about all the things about being on time, dress code, bullying, harassment, discrimination, DEI, all of those things. And it also provides all the rights that employees have, FMLA, for example, reasonable accommodations. And so the goal is that a person entering the workplace, first of all, knows the expectations, what to expect when I go to work. And then secondly, is kind of reinvigorated to be excited to go to work, because there's some excitement, I think, in having a career, whatever that is. I always say there's respect in every job. I mean, I was at a festival this past weekend. It was a huge festival, 15,000 people. And the people running the sanitation, running the porta-johns, I made a point to stop and say, thank you.
Yes.
This is great. You're doing a great job.
Acknowledgement.
Their work matters.
I know.
And I think some people think, oh, that's a dirty job. And it is a dirty job. It's a job that matters, and it has value and worth. And we need to refocus this whole concept of the workplace, which is a big part of our lives, to bringing more excitement to the workplace and owning your own career and owning your own success. I tell people, no one cares more about your career than you do.
Exactly.
So own it and start somewhere, and then from there that might lead to something else. Your first job might not be your perfect job, but it's a job. And I talk about, if you're leaving a job, how to leave it correctly and with respect, and the things. And every time I read a case, I think, if only that person had read my book, they would not have been in this situation.
So there you go. If you want to stay hired and you're leading a team that you actually love and you want them to stay with you, then you might want to get the book.
Absolutely. And you might want your team to read the book as well.
Exactly.
If every manager would just go through one chapter a week with their employees, it's a great way to set the expectations with your employees.
And I have worked with lots of executives, and a lot of them actually, and I don't know if it kind of went aside, over the last 3 years, but they would have like a book club. And because I know they used my book, my clients used my book. I was excited when they did that, which is, I'm gonna put a plug in, Magnetic Trust, how great leaders keep top performers and get extraordinary results. And it's all about building trust.
It is. That's a really good point.
Yes, it's all about how to build trust with my employees. And then there are 8 rules about that. But, there's tons of resources out there if you just kind of take the time to find them and then actually implement them into your leadership everyday life.
Well, and I wrote the book in a way that it's a lot of pictures and short stories and short examples, real life examples that I've encountered. I tried to make it not like this boring, words.
Yeah.
It's a light read, and I made sure to have college students read it beforehand. I'm really proud because Ruben Daniels, the former COO of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, wrote, I gave him a preview of the book, and he was so kind to write a recommendation on the back of the book for me, which I really was very proud of because I do a lot of work with the EEOC. I find that organization to be very valuable. So I felt very excited that he found it to be as important as it was. And one of the things he loved about the book is I actually talk about payday as well. How when you start to work, you're going to get flooded with credit card. Do you want this credit card? You can afford an expensive car. And, talking about how to start early in your career as you get paid to not just go spend, to kind of live within your means, which also helps you to stay hired. Because if you get into financial distress, sometimes people start to make ethical decisions that might not be ideal. And so not getting yourself in that situation can also help you to stay hired.
Exactly. So what is your suggestion about creating and building a respectful workplace, which you said that you are obsessed with this?
I am obsessed with it. Well, I read all the time, and actually there's this article in Cosmopolitan out, I think today, about, they were talking about how this woman was in this terrible workplace, an abusive workplace, and she goes to HR, and they basically said, oh, well, he's an older man, and it's generational, and just learn to adjust, you're young. And so I was actually doing a training for the EEOC at their technical assistant seminar last month, and I used this example. And if you are in HR, please listen to me, I'm begging. So a lot of times I'll go into a workplace and almost do like a reinvestigation, because I tell people it's no HR is better than having bad HR.
Yes.
And unfortunately, we have a lot of bad managers, and frankly, we have a lot of bad HR. And what I see is this. So if you look at the workplace, like the ideal workplace, let's analyze that to be like a bundt cake. A bundt cake is the ideal workplace. It's got flour, which is respect. It has, eggs, which is trust, mutual respect, all those things. All the positive things that go into an ideal workplace. And an employee goes to HR and says, you know what, I don't have a bundt cake, I have nachos. And the HR goes, well, tell me why you have nachos. Well, there's tomatoes and beans and sour cream and there's tortilla chips. And the HR person, because it drives me crazy, they'll say, well, to have a hostile working environment, you need to also have cheese. And you didn't say you had cheese. So yes, you have yelling and disrespect, but it wasn't because you're a woman. This person yells at everyone.
Yes.
So go about your way, not a hostile working environment. And then they don't deal with it.
Yeah.
And so my point is, stop asking, do we have nachos, which is a official hostile working environment, and ask, why are there tomatoes in my bundt cake?
Yeah.
Why is there disrespect and yelling and rudeness and chaos and bullying? Why are these things in my workplace? Address those things. And it's like that movie Groundhog Day where you see it over and over again. It's my Groundhog Day of every day. I've got 4 or 5 on my desk right now of, they've always been like this. This is just how they are. And, even like President Biden promised that if you work for me, I will not tolerate any disrespect. You'll be fired on the spot.
Yeah.
But when faced with his top person who engaged in all the bullying behaviors that he said he wasn't going to tolerate, their response to that, first of all, they ended it
avoidance.
With, the first thing was, it's not because of gender, which burned me up. Because that's, they're saying, well, you know what, you don't have nachos, so, But the other thing they said is, you know how we're going to, yes, he did violate our policy on workplace civility or whatever they have. We're going to have more training. No, we're going to have more brown bag sessions. That's what we need, brown bag sessions. No, that person needs to be removed from the workplace.
Yes.
Just like you promised he would be removed from the workplace. Now, I'm not saying President Biden was even involved in that decision. I'm sure that was 10 levels below him.
Yeah.
But the point is, we talk a big talk, but we don't actually walk the walk. We don't do what we say we're going to do. That's a courageous decision, and I understand that. But these people in the workplace that are yelling and screaming and creating chaos and retaliating and creating an abusive, toxic work environment, they have to go.
They have to go. Unless they're in an elected position, and then they can't go.
Those are my hardest cases.
Yes.
I was actually a witness in a case that I had done an investigation for, and the hearing officer asked me, do you always, they're always fired? And I said, well, honestly, the hardest ones I've ever done have been elected officials or officials appointed by like city council or something like that. And that becomes very political and unfortunate. And those are my hardest cases. Or the other hardest cases are tenured professors.
Yes.
They're very difficult as well. So those are kind of the two areas that I think are most difficult, but in 99% of the cases, there's a way to remove the person.
It's funny because I was just having a conversation the other day with a really good friend of mine who I went to school with, and we're still in touch. Of course, that was just like yesterday. Mike, don't be laughing too loud over there, too loud. But she was working for an organization, a company, who he was just rude, obnoxious, would just be yelling and screaming and just, have expectations for one thing, and then he would just change them midstream without communicating, and it was just one issue after another. It was a very hostile work environment that he created. It's his company, and she is just now leaving. But it's sad that people have to go through that.
I always say, and if you read my LinkedIn posts, I say this all the time. Is anybody thinking about the victim here?
No,
because
they don't.
These are real people. And I'll tell people, would you want your daughter to be subjected to this? Your son, your spouse, your mother? These people are going into a workplace, and what they're willing to give their efforts, all they ask in return is respect. And I've got a case right now, an investigation where, this person is screaming at people, and this young woman, it's her first job, and she recorded him. And he's literally berating her for 40 minutes. And let's say her name is Heather.
Yeah.
Why? And he's talking to Heather.
Yeah.
Well, why can't Heather do her job? Why can't Heather figure out what she's supposed to be doing? And this person is just an unfathomable bully. And he just berates her. And this is her first job. This is what she thinks the workplace is like.
Yeah.
And I remember interviewing this young woman years ago. She was fresh out of college, first job. And I interviewed her about her workplace, and we were talking about her manager, and she said, well, I went home and I asked my sister, does your manager treat you like a person? Because my manager doesn't treat me like a person. You deserve better.
Exactly.
And I think that employers have got to refocus themselves to say, we're not going to tolerate this, and then don't tolerate this.
Yes.
If you're going to say it, you need to mean it, because the second that guy, that scientist under President Biden didn't get fired, what President Biden said doesn't matter.
Exactly.
You're not doing what you say you're going to do.
Right.
So it's
blowing hot air.
Well, and I think he meant it at the time.
Yes.
Until it's actually in front of you.
Yes.
And then you're like, oh, well, not that guy.
Yeah.
Everyone else is getting fired, but I need him.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. And then you're paralyzed to make the decision to actually remove the person, which that's the only answer, is that person has to go.
Yes. And because what's happening, and you're seeing people jumping ship all the time. People leave because they cannot stand working for their boss anymore. Their manager, whoever it is, when they don't show them respect or give them opportunities and are just downright disgusting and mean, people aren't going to put up with that. And it's your high performers are the ones that are going to leave.
Well, and studies show these people who are harassed in the workplace that 75-80% of people who are harassed don't complain, they just quit.
Yeah.
And they walk
I know,
out
because
the
I was
door.
one of them.
Oh, right. I mean,
I
and
was one of
you
them.
don't want to make waves. And,
Yeah.
and I talk in the book about if you're going to resign respectfully, and all that. I encourage people to complain about issues as well, of course, or report issues. But they just leave. And so my employers will say, well, no one's complained. No one has said anything. Well, she's saying something now, or he's saying something now. But, I've been here 20 years. No one's ever said anything.
Well, there's always also the instance where you might say something, but then the HR believes the manager and not the employee.
Well, I remember going in and doing a reinvestigation where this woman was the absolute most horrific person. In fact, at the hearing, these employees were so traumatized that they wanted to bring their counselors to the hearing. They could not even look at her. It was just such a horrific situation. And HR did their investigation, and they're like, oh, she's got some communication issues, because usually they manipulate HR as well. They're manipulating and all of that. And if you're my target, I've already gone to HR to say, you know, I don't know if Heather's going to work out. She's having some issues.
Yeah.
So when you go to complain, they're like, oh, well, you know, you're having some performance issues. And so, and then there was a reinvestigation, and it was like, what in the world? This is like workplace violence. What's going on in here? And so it really comes down to making sure your process is set up, and you've got people who know how to do an investigation. Like it sounds really basic, but honestly, it's a skill that a lot of people don't have. And don't you think in some ways people now look at HR like it needs to be strategic? And unless I'm doing strategy, I'm not really doing high level HR work. And what I would call the grunt work of like employee relations and investigations, that's not sexy and fun. And so people don't want to do that. That's not something they enjoy doing for whatever reason. And so it's just, we've got to get a focus on everyone gets fairness in the process. Some people who report are lying. That's the other thing. So I don't know until we do an investigation who's is telling the truth. And then rendering a fair and objective conclusion. That's what's needed in every organization, no matter the size.
So how do you create that, as you say, a positive, high-functioning work environment? It's because it's the role of management to do this.
Well, it's setting the culture from the top, first of all, and making sure that the people at the top actually are walking the walk. I mean, they're saying the right things. You've got the right processes in place. You've got policies which are boring. Nobody wants to write the policies, but you actually need a structure.
Right.
But you also need to communicate that. When an employer calls me and says, Karen, we want you to train not just our managers, but also our employees, every one of them. And then they'll say, we don't need to see your presentation in advance. You just come in and do your thing. I think you're a good employer.
Yeah.
Because I'm straight shooter. I tell these employees everything they're entitled to.
Right.
And I make sure they know you don't tolerate any of this nonsense.
Right.
And I know I've got a good employer when they are willing to make that kind of investment, not just on the managers, which is at least do that.
Right.
But then also on all of the employees. And then they say, we don't need to see your presentation. We just want you to come do your thing. And I say when I'm there, I'm like, let me tell you something. Your employer, they didn't even need to see this presentation.
Right.
I'm telling you what your rights are. I'm going to tell you exactly what you should expect. Number one, it's your rules. Don't do any of the things I'm talking about. But these are your tools. This is exactly what you need to do if there is something going on in the workplace. I did this training for an organization. It was out of Washington State, and it was a agriculture company. And they're like, well, when you do the training for the office, we need this. But when you do the training for like the field workers, we were thinking we'd do that. I was like, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
The respect you're giving to the people in the ivory tower are the same respect you should be giving to the people picking the vegetables. There should be no difference in those expectations. We have this theory that somehow a public works hourly employee deserves a different level of respect than the CEO. And that's another readjustment we need to be making, because the public works person has a family, he or she's going back to they're coming to work expecting the same thing. And so it's breaking those cultures that historically have been difficult, rough, bullying, whatever it is.
Right.
And resetting those expectations.
So when you because you deal with HR, obviously, when you're working with HR, how do you make sure that they understand that they cannot be putting their personal beliefs and opinions in how they are communicating the company's culture, let's say?
So for example, when I do training on how to conduct investigations, the first thing I'll say is Brett Kavanaugh guilty of raping Dr. I forgot her name right now. And 99% of them go, oh, absolutely, 100%. I said, well, then you're not a very good investigator.
Right.
What facts do you have? What facts were there to prove that? And it's forcing people to separate their personal opinion about politics, about the narrative of the day, and being able to step in and actually be objective. And it is unbiased and looking at true facts, because I have analyzed that case very carefully about known facts that are out there. And I walk the investigators through, where are your facts? You can never rely on a narrative unless you have the personal facts. For example, when I write my articles, I will read about a case and then I go pull up that case.
Right.
I don't rely on what this person said about the case. I actually pull
Go
up the
to
lawsuit.
the source. I mean, you have got, people don't do that. They just take, verbatim what somebody else said, and then they take that as the gospel.
And then it's the game of telephone.
It is.
And
it
so
is.
I always, when you read something in the paper, I have pulled up the lawsuit, I've read the case, and I learn so much more when I do that. That's the other thing. I learn more facts, I learn more information. But for HR people, I just want them to understand their role isn't to be a friend to anybody. It's not to be a friend to everybody. So, oh, they're a friend of the managers. They need to be, their only goal is to make sure the workplace is functioning, legally compliant for everyone working there. They're not a friend to anybody. They're not on anybody's side. They're there to make sure that this workplace functions fully. And they're the gatekeeper.
Yeah.
So they really, and I had this case recently of a woman who, it was a Facebook issue, and there was conflict about a Facebook issue. Well, the HR person agreed with the post of one person and not the other person. So instead of objectively looking at it, should this person have posted this? She was more focused on, well, this message is more, I think, appropriate than that message. So that's
and
not
then there's
the
the
test.
perception of favoritism. When
All
that
the
happens.
time.
Yes.
Well, yeah, all the time. There's always a perception of, well, you're in it for management, or you're, all the time. And it's a huge responsibility, and it's such a necessary role in organizations. So when I do that investigations training, by the end, I had one recently, and by the end, one of the women, the head woman, was like, I just want everybody to know, I really didn't understand that question in the beginning. I was like,
I like to change my
I'd like
answer
to change
now.
my answer. She said, I want to change my answer. It's like, that's fine. But it's a great way for people to really think about, and also their biases that they bring to the table. We all have implicit bias.
We do.
People say, well, I don't see color. I'm like, yes, you do. Science says that. I mean, science tells you that. I tell people, close your eyes. What is the race and gender of your presenter today? I didn't even notice you were a white woman. Yes, you did. You noticed my height, my weight, my hair color. I assess my socioeconomic status. I mean, we do that with people. It's science.
Yeah.
And so it's helping people to also give themselves permission to have their implicit bias go in their brain, because it's going there anyway. But you can control your actions, and you can control your speech. And so it's focusing people to help them to look at that.
So, and I had a thought that just obviously left my head, left my brain. So when it comes to, in the last few minutes of the show, what HR, issues or, things that managers should be aware of when it comes to making sure that they're doing the right thing?
So I tell managers my main theme is don't do nothing.
Yeah.
Do something.
Yeah.
I have this training that's called Why is this person still working here? And it goes through and managers.
I need to see a copy of that. I'll give you credit.
That's actually my next book. My next book is titled Why is this person still working here? And so it's but it's all about, looking at analyzing your employees into 3 categories: solid, rock star, and oh boy.
Yeah.
And if you've got an oh boy or an uh-oh, what have you done about that? Now, also, what have you done with your rock star?
Yeah.
Your rock star is probably on autopilot, and you need to take that off, because your rock star needs some attention too. And what are you doing for that person? But also, what are you doing to address the performance of people that are taking up all your time? They're like a time vacuum, and they're not doing their job. And I try to convince managers that your life and work life is better and happier when everyone on your team is happy and functioning.
Yeah.
So even if you don't even care about your employees, which I hope you do, but even if you don't, be selfish. Like, your life is better when everyone is functioning fully. So
I know. What are the benefits there? Oh, then you don't have to, micromanage, which nobody should be micromanaging. I cannot stand that. And that's one thing I always make sure that the people I work with, if they stop. And, but I think if you allow your people to do the job, you give them the resources, you give them the education, the knowledge, and you let them do it, the research is out there that they're going to be high performing.
Absolutely. I do this exercise when I do my manager training, and I'll say, okay, in your groups, give me the characteristics of the best boss you ever worked for and the characteristics of the worst boss you ever worked for. And they're exactly the same anywhere I go. You know, they listened, they cared about me, they were empathetic, they set expectations, they held people accountable, you know. And then the worst boss is micromanager, suffocating, you know, bully, those awful things, chaos. And then I say, okay, here's the list. Assume that I had a list of all your employees and I sent them this list and asked them to check all that apply as it relates to you. How many checks are on this side and how many checks are on this side? If you're being perfectly honest with yourself, how many people would check? You listen, you're empathetic, you care about your people, you set expectations, you never ask them to do anything you wouldn't do. Yeah. You're present, you know, or how many people would say you micromanage, you're suffocating, you create chaos. And really forcing, it's hard for people to look inward.
It is very hard. It is very hard. And but I think that is an excellent activity that you do, because especially if it gets shared back, well, that's the whole 360 thing. But 360
that
assessment.
would be the perfect thing, right?
Yes, exactly.
If people feel like they can trust the system, people are always afraid of retaliation.
Yes, yes. And that's where culture comes in,
right?
Where you are creating an open, honest communication where people can actually share, whether it's their concerns, their fears, or just ideas that maybe won't be stolen. I mean, it's a whole nother animal, but yeah, it is. And I think it's important for leaders and managers to understand that.
Absolutely. And they just, the other exercise that I do in this training is I'll say, what percentage of your time, if you're being perfectly honest, if we were looking at your job description, whatever, is managing people? Is it 10%? It differs for everybody depending on how many people you manage. And what percentage of the time is like doing the work, like the engineering work or the accounting work or whatever? And what percent is strategy if you're like a CEO? And then let's say they say, well, it's 25%. And I'll say, last week, did you devote 25% of your 40 hours or 50 hours to managing your people? Right. Oh, well, last week wasn't a normal week.
You always get
what
that.
about the week before?
It's never a normal week.
And so, you know, and saying, this is your job. It might not be the part of your job you love, but this is the job that you signed up for. And if you devote that time to your people, you will see magic happen. That's the formula. That's the secret sauce.
And people crave it. Your employees are craving it, guys. I mean, seriously, they really are.
They're craving just a modicum of appreciation and value and respect and opportunity. And it's really meeting people where they are, what their needs are right then, what they value at that time.
Yeah. And even looking at them and asking them questions like, where do you want to be? You know, what's going to help you be better in your role? And then you have to follow through and make sure that happens. The manager does.
And people value different things at different times.
Exactly.
And so times of their life, depending on whether, when I was young, I was like, I value being perceived as the hardest working lawyer in this law firm. That's what I valued. Then I had a child and I was like, I don't value that anymore. And
I need more balance.
That was just reality.
Yeah.
And it's not, gender bias. It just was my reality. And so people valued it. But making assumptions about people. I had a woman come up to me after a training and say, I have this employee, she's got 2 kids. I've been denying her a promotion because I just assumed she wouldn't want to travel. I don't know that. I'm making an assumption based on my bias and based on my own life that I wouldn't want that promotion. So people say, do unto others as you would want. I'm like, that's not the test. Do unto others as they would want. That's why you ask, what do you value?
Right.
That's why the first question managers should be asking first day is, what do you value?
Yeah.
What's important to you? And if it's promotion, then that's one thing. If it's I want work-life balance, then that might be a different path.
Right.
But it's identifying each individual. Again, that's the role of the manager. That's the gatekeeping that we have in organizations.
So if we are going to be winding up, what is one thing that you would like to make sure that the listeners out there really know and understand as an HR attorney?
Well, I would want managers and HR people to know that their employees deserve a respectful workplace. Period, full stop. Whether if you have a legally compliant workplace, you're also going to have a respectful workplace. But stop just focusing on the law and focus on the day-to-day culture of your organization and what your organization values. And hold people accountable for making sure that you are creating that respectful and civil and inclusive work environment. It shouldn't just be lip speak. It needs to be actual, in reality. People are coming to work and they're getting a respectful workplace, a respectful and civil workplace.
So if people want to learn how to create a respectful workplace, how would they get in touch with you, Karen?
KarenMichaelConsulting.com. They can go on my website. All my information is on there.
Awesome. So that's going to do it for us today. Thank you so much, Karen, for being on the show and sharing your expertise with those listeners. And you are listening to Talking Leadership with the Leadership Doc. That is me, Dr. Heather Williamson, and I will see you next Monday, or you can hear me next Monday. And other than that, have an amazing day.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.